To join us in reviewing President Tinubu's economic policies in the last year is economist and CEO of NairaMetrics, Ugo Dre Obi-Chukwu. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Hi, good morning. Nice having me.
So exactly a year ago today, we all heard the phrase, subsidy is gone. And that seemed to determine the trajectory of how things went in the coming months, even though the even though the absence or the removal of subsidy is now it's being debatable, especially because of some experts and their opinions regarding this. But I would ask you, what your thoughts were when you heard the bold declaration of subsidy being gone, and can you categorically say now that subsidy is truly gone?
Interesting questions. So flashback to May 29, when we're all watching the president give his maiden speech. Out of nowhere, we just heard fuel subsidy is gone. So, I mean, I kind of gasped my breath, and I guess everyone in his team did the same as well. Everyone was surprised. It was actually off script. It wasn't meant to be in there. But it was a very bold and courageous move for the president at that time. And I think I was one of those who applauded it. We all have been calling for removal of fuel subsidy for some years now, obviously because of the negative impact it has on government's fiscal revenues. A lot of people didn't know that fuel subsidy was being paid essentially by borrowing. So government fiscal deficit was widening, which is really bad for the economy. And so it kind of looked like a very good move at the time. However, it's not just removing fuel subsidy, and we've all learned that, yes, you can make bold moves like that, but what comes after is really what matters. And so a lot of the things that Nigerians expected in terms of the support that you would want, from an economic perspective, is it, better transportation, better roads, a lot of the infrastructure development that you needed to see to sort of, help with the fuel subsidy removal. We haven't seen any of that. And so that's pretty shocking to a lot of people, and that's why Nigerians just can't stomach it. It's difficult, stressful. You now pay more than 3 times the actual amount, so you're sacrificing a lot, but you're not seeing any commensurate, improvement in your life. And so the obvious question I asked you, so your guys here is, has your life been better in the last 1 year compared to now? I guess for a lot of people it's no. So nobody has seen the impact of it. So, because the point is that Nigerians like to sacrifice a lot. Nigerians will sacrifice for you all the time. But at the end of the day, what does that really amount to? And so if you look back to your question, yes, it was a bold move, but it hasn't really panned out well. And again, I think there's still some form of subsidy going on. So it's not like you've actually removed it, as you would think. The World Bank said it recently that there's still subsidy, so you probably still need to even increase, the prices. So all in all, bold move, good. For the macroeconomy, perhaps okay, because at least fiscal deficit is reduced. But for the regular, ordinary Nigerians, it's just been hellish.
So when you say it's a bold move, you also mentioned that it was off script. So was that, does that show that the government, didn't really have a plan? The president didn't really have a plan? Because I remember, I did see, that you celebrated it. You tweeted. So much economic policy changes in the space of just 2 weeks from President Tinubu, unprecedented. All this without even appointing ministers and hundreds of special advisors. This is what I mean by you're ready to work from day one.
Yes.
You said this is beyond impressive per Niger standards. So I know you've clarified this, also because of the backlash that you got on X. But is this showing, because they've also had a lot of policies that they had to reverse.
Yeah.
Is this showing that they really know what they're doing with regards to the economy, or they're just trying whatever it is that works? Well,
in hindsight, it kind of sounds like it was a bit of showmanship. So at that time, when we saw a lot of these policies being pushed out, it was unprecedented because we're used to seeing governments start out very slowly, especially at the presidential level. And so when you see a president come on and, from straight out of the blocks, start to push out economic policies, you believe that, that is really going to be followed up by some concrete actions. So it wasn't just fuel subsidy removal. He took out the CBN governor at the time. The exchange rate was immediately, unified. So there were a lot of things that people had called for that he was doing. And so it looked good. But midway into the first 3 months, we then started to observe, wait a minute, we haven't even seen your cabinet yet, right? So we have so much challenges. It kind of sounded like you're going to have your cabinet like in the first month, because he had a very solid economic team leading all the way to the elections. And we all saw him travel with most of these guys. And so it was a no-brainer that within a month or two, you were going to see, ministers being announced.
But that took about 3 months.
Exactly, if not even more. And so even the CBN governor took way longer as well, right? Because we knew the acting CBN governor wasn't going to be there,
yes.
Forever. So that was where we started to see problems. So like, we've seen this happen before. It happened in 2015 when Buhari came in and took months to get his cabinet in. And when you don't get your cabinet in, we're doing 1 year today, but essentially these guys have had maybe 6, 7 months.
No, they have 9 months.
Exactly,
I think
9
in
months.
a day or so it would be 9 months. So do you think it would have made any fundamental difference if these policies, so the unification of the exchange rate, do you think it would have made any difference if the cabinet was established before these policies were announced?
Well, to what extent, I don't know, right? But I think it would have made a difference, especially, nomination or appointment of CBN governor, Minister of Finance, or coordinating Minister of Finance, some of the key ministries that really drive the economy, even some parastatals. A lot of those things would have helped set a lot of plans in motion. And I think Nigerians would have seen it. You would have seen some actions. We all saw the ministers defending their 1 year in office or something last week.
Yes.
So it wasn't really impressive. I don't know if you were impressed by it. I wasn't. So it wasn't actually impressive. So you could see that there was really nothing much that they could say they've done. You know how bureaucratic Nigeria is anyway. So it's one thing for you to be Minister of Finance, but being able to actually sit down and run that ministry is a different ballgame. So I think it would have made a difference. 3 months is a long time, right? Yeah. It's a long time. And so that is where I think you had a lot of missteps. And that's why you're seeing a lot of policies, confusion everywhere, and things are not really going as well as they should go. There's a huge dislink, shockingly, between fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities. Even though I've been in a room before with the Minister of Finance and the CBN governor, and you could see quite some synergy. They have a history, have a relationship. They actually work pretty well compared to the former Minister of Finance and the CBN governor that we all heard always had a little bit of friction. So these ones actually work well. But in terms of the actual coordination from the ministry and the CBN perspective, it's not there. So the CBN is fighting inflation as much as it can with the only tool he has, which is monetary policy. But on the fiscal side, you're not seeing that much. And the CBN governor himself has said it, that, look, you can't win the inflation battle by just raising NPR, right? We've raised NPR so much now that I don't know how far we can raise it. I actually think they shouldn't even raise it anymore, because the impact is not necessarily being felt on the streets. So things are still expensive, and that's because a lot of the drivers of inflation are not regular things that you and I. It's not interest rate.
Why would you say that the increasing of the NPR is not having the intended effect that it should have? I've heard criticism leveled against it, saying that the other factors such as food inflation is being affected by insecurity and several other arguments. So from your perspective, why would you say that it's not an effective tool right now in managing the inflation? So
the conventional wisdom for most economists or analysts or whatever out there globally is that when you have galloping inflation, a central bank uses monetary policy to slow it down. So monetary policy essentially is you increase interest rates. And so when you increase interest rates, then you're telling investors essentially, don't keep your money, don't spend money, don't borrow, just keep it in the bank, and then we'll give you interest rate, because you're trying to slow down money supply in the economy. And by doing that, that means people won't buy much anymore, and then prices will start to go down. That's how these things work. But Nigeria is very peculiar. Nigeria is not your regular everyday country. So you can raise interest rates as much as you can. A large section of the informal economy doesn't depend on bank lending to price their product. What do they depend on? They look at things like fuel price. They look at transportation from one place to the other. They look at electricity. They look at insecurity. They look at food, for example. You grow crops from maybe Benue State. By the time you get to Lagos or Akwa Ibom, half is spoiled already,
Yeah.
but they're still going to price it like it's the entire thing. So instead of the price actually being half of what it is full. So these are all the things that feed into what is the CBN going to do? Remember, this was also one of the things the former CBN was trying to do. So they were doing monetary policy, and then they thought, you know what, let's start doing development finance. I started doing the job of the ministry, and then what we have is a basket of problems. And that now even made the CBN governor look like he was, an emperor. And that's when they say Nigeria has happened to you. You try to maybe wrestle things or try to fix things on the main street, and then that now creates a whole new problem. And the current CBN governor said, I ain't doing that. I'm not going to development finance. I'm going to stick to my lane, which is monetary policy. So let the guys on the fiscal policy side do their job.
There's also been a lot of criticism with regard. I mean, the vice president claimed that Nigeria has secured $20 billion, foreign direct investment, and all of that. So I want your thoughts on that one. Are we truly, receiving that level of FDI in Nigeria today? What are they getting wrong in order to attract that level of FDI in the country today? And of course, is even realistic that anybody would invest in Nigeria? You see, of course, Total Energies, is moving to Angola, I believe. There's many other companies who have left. To talk about the FDI mystery.
Okay, so I guess the reverse question is have you seen any of that money? No. So we look at the data, we haven't seen it. To be fair to them, first quarter data for capital importation is not out. So we don't know to what extent. So all we've been hearing from the minister is we're expecting. I mean, there's this joke that we often share in a WhatsApp group that we'll say line of sight. And anybody say the line of sight? Because he keeps saying there's a line of sight. We haven't seen it yet. Just yesterday again, they said, there's this oil and gas deal, $7 billion or thereabout has been signed. It hasn't come in yet. But fun fact, I don't think we've done more than $3 billion annually on FDI in over a decade, every year.
Yes.
So FDIs are traditionally very small. Now, FPI is where we tend to get a lot of investors in. And last year, we barely did just $3.9 billion or so in total capital importation. So investors are obviously not coming into Nigeria at the moment. Now, what is the government trying to do? So one of the reasons why you're seeing NPR go up, which is interest rate, is the higher the rates, then the more incentive you give FPIs to bring money into the country. We've done it before and it worked. We did it in 2018, 2019. If you recall, the exchange rate was $3.60 to the $1 for a long time, for about a year, 2 years. And that was because we're offering foreign investors high interest rates in exchange for bringing their dollar in. But hey, it's a different world today. Yeah. That time, interest rates globally was next to zero. It was very low. And capital outflows was favorable to emerging markets. But today, it's different. Interest rate globally is high. So capital outflows is going more to the West than to frontier emerging markets like Nigeria. So the question is, anybody who has $1 billion, $10 million, would likely want to keep that money in the US or in Europe. In fact, at the IMF event that happened, spring meeting in April, the story was that a third of global outflows is going to the United States. So we're in a different world now. So the competition is even stiffer for foreign investment. So you can't just say, because we have 200 million population, we have natural resources, you think investors are going to come. No, if you like, give them 30%. There's got to be a lot of things that we have to do internally. They need to also see that we have our fiscal side sorted out before you start to see a lot of this global.
Okay. All right, with all the money that you're making at this point. So Nigerian business people have been accused of taking advantage where there is an inflation or with a struggling economy. But some of us would argue that these people need to recoup the money that they invested in their business in the first place. So how do you explain people automatically hearing that the dollar has gained strength and immediately increasing the stock in their stores?
Okay, I think that it's very important for Nigerians to understand that we're in a free market economy. We're not in a socialist or communist economy where you see price control. Please never, ever, ever ask for price control. It never works. It's a recipe for chaos, right? Government should never be involved in price control or trying to fix prices for people. That's the power of demand and supply. Demand and supply would often, it might take time, but it drives competition. And then where you see somebody pricing products artificially or at a price that is not realistic, that's an opportunity for somebody to compete, and that's how free markets work. Now, however, what government should do, and to an extent they are doing, is where you see monopolies, because monopolies should not be allowed to operate freely, even in a free market. So because when you see a monopoly, then a monopoly can often just be increasing prices without caring, right? So that's where you tend to see things like regulation and price control and trying to ensure that the prices that they are setting is favorable, or the prices is reflective enough of their cost so that you don't unduly take advantage. Now, government also involves itself in mega utilities like telcos, where there might not be many of them, but they serve millions of people. So in cases like that as well, you tend to see regulation. It's not just typical to Nigeria, it's a global thing. But please, let's not ever encourage
price control.
All right. So I would also like you to speak, about taxation as an economic policy. But that will be when we come back. We will take a very short break. When we come back, we continue the discussions this morning on the Tinubu presidency and, of course, its economic drive so far. Welcome back. Still talking the Tinubu administration 1 year down the line. And, of course, how well and how far Nigeria has gone, surviving the economic policies of the current administration. We still have with us this morning Ugo Dre, who, of course, has joined us to have his thoughts on these things. I want you to speak on taxation as an economic policy, because that's what it seems that they be doing most of. The cybersecurity levy, increment in electricity levy, tariff, increment in petrol subsidies and all of that. When the president was campaigning, he did speak a little bit about widening the tax bracket and some of all of that. So do you think that this is most of what they seem to be doing to raise funds?
Okay, so let me try and put things into proper perspective for the viewers and even the folks here. Nigeria has been running a fiscal deficit for over a decade. So fiscal deficit essentially is when the government's revenue is lower than the amount it actually spends. And one of the problems of a fiscal deficit is that it often leads to exchange rate depreciation, purely economic phenomenon. It often also leads to inflation, because when a government is spending more than it earns, it is essentially borrowing, isn't it? Exactly. So it's borrowing. So when it's borrowing, it borrows at an interest rate and it pays. And so that also expands government's debt. And then to make it worse, if a lot of the borrowing is not going into productive causes or sectors, creating jobs, aiding economic growth, that even exacerbates the problem. And so that's what we've been facing for years. And so the government is saying, you know what, we can't keep borrowing, we can't keep expanding the fiscal deficit. Our tax to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world, which is about 10% or so, or 9%. In most countries, it's at 40, it's at 50, even at 60, even at 70%. So the government is not collecting enough taxes. So it's not like we don't have taxes. It's not like they need to raise taxes. That's what some of us are against. I don't think they should raise taxes anywhere. I don't even think there should be new taxes. There's just enough taxes that you should even consolidate and may perhaps reduce. The focus should be on ensuring that most people pay their tax. And that's where we seem to be faltering. And of course, that's because more than 50% of the economy is informal. So it's difficult to get them to pay tax. And so what you're seeing now is a lot of efforts by the tax authorities, particularly the FIRS, in trying to introduce technology to tax collection. They all have your BVN, your NIN, your bank account is all linked. They want to link your phone to your bank account. This all just gives them visibility into how people are making money, and so that they can be more effective with taxes. So that's essentially why you're seeing a lot of these tax things go up. But what I think is a challenge, and what they should really stop doing, is trying to create more taxes.
Wow. Anyway, there's so many things to talk about, but we have to move on to other conversations. Thank you very much, Ugo Dre Obi-Chukwu. It's a pleasure to have had you. All right?